Many people dream of living in Paris, but from a financial standpoint, is it actually feasible? In today's video, I'll be sharing the cost of living in Paris in 2025. I'll walk you through a weekend in my life here in Paris, sharing exactly what I spend from rent to rosé. Coucou, comment ça va? I'm on my way to go get flowers at the flower market, and we're gonna see how our day goes. So let's get into this. Okay, so let's start with some of the small little luxuries, as I like to call them. So there are certain things in my life that I just consider to be essential for living. And one of those would actually be buying fresh flowers every single week. I would say overall, what do I budget for small luxuries every single month? I would say that my budget is around 150 euros for small luxuries every single month. That of course begs the question, since my last video, how have prices increased, right? So are my little luxury purchases, do I have to budget more than I used to? I would say yes, it's not as much as I think probably food has increased, but I would definitely say I'm probably paying 30 to 50 euros more for my little luxuries per month than I did during my last video. I am trying to wait for a package. I have a package that's supposedly going to be delivered today, but I may just kind of blow off waiting for that package. I will show you. The package is a piece of artwork that I'm going to be putting over here. I'm going to put it in front of this. I'm going to put it in this frame, and then I'm going to use this frame and a couple of the pieces of art to hide the television, because I hate, like, you see that? You see that, like, you don't want to see a television, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing, but I am hoping it will arrive soon. All right, next, let's talk about rent. Let's talk about, the apartment, all of those things. So for rent, utilities, and phone, my rent actually has been relatively not that bad, actually, since my last video, which of course was in 2023. So the thing about my rent is that in my very first apartment, I was in Paris, I was paying quite a lot, about 1,800 euros, which, converts to about what, like, at the time, maybe $1,900, $2,000. And it was, I would say, about quite a bit smaller than this apartment. Like, it was a smaller one-bedroom. This apartment, by simply paying, 300 euros more, I have this apartment, which is not twice the size, but almost twice the size of my last apartment. So this apartment is really, really great. This apartment is about 900 square feet, and I pay about $2,200 for this apartment. Now, I want to note, when I first moved in here, the rent was frankly closer to 1,900 euros. So that was, again, we had a really good exchange rate when I moved in. So that actually was pretty steady. It was about $2,000. So the cost of the rent has definitely increased about $200, maybe even $300 since I first arrived. With that being said, this apartment, right now, I have friends who are looking for an apartment kind of this same size. You cannot find this in this price range anymore in Paris. So for the apartment that I'm living in, the price range for this apartment now is probably closer to, I would say, $2,700, probably $2,600 to $2,700. So I am getting a deal. The cost for housing in Paris has really, really increased over the past 3 years. And there are, I think, a lot of reasons for that, but also what is really hurting those of us right now who rely on our income from the US is the exchange rate. I am not looking for this to be a major political thing, okay? So please do not come for me. I'm just going to tell you the facts of how things were. So I obviously moved to Paris in 2020 during the Trump administration, during COVID, okay? So during that period, the conversion rate was, during that year 2020, like the conversion rate was actually pretty steady. It was pretty consistent, mainly because of COVID. Once we, like, and when I say we, I mean Europe kind of started to come out of the lockdowns and things started to return to normal. Meanwhile, COVID was just kind of going, there was no real lockdown, I think, in the US, and things were kind of getting were still very crazy. The exchange rate substantially dropped. So the value of the dollar substantially dropped against the euro. Then, when President Biden was elected, the exchange rate stabilized. And so basically during his entire during President Biden's entire presidency, the exchange rate was either 1-to-1, so $1 to 1 euro, or it was about 98 cents to 1 euro. I think the lowest it ever got was 96 cents to 1 euro. So it was a very stable exchange rate during his presidency. The moment that Donald Trump took office, the exchange rate dropped. Within that first month, the exchange rate dropped from, I believe it was about 96 cents to 94 cents. And then once he instituted like the tariffs and all of that, it dropped to basically like 90 cents. And that's kind of where it is now. So we are losing a lot more money on the exchange rate than I have during like almost my whole time, other than the first Trump presidency. Like during all of the Biden administration, the exchange rate was very stable. So also note, as far as utilities are pretty steady. So I have my phone, my cell phone, my internet, and my home phone are all kind of packaged in one, and that's 80 euros a month. And then my utilities are basically my electricity, like that's it. That's really your only utility. And my utilities vary. I like my apartment warm. I like it really, really warm. And my apartment is heated with gas. And because it is heated with gas, the cost of gas it's been fluctuating a lot since things happened with Ukraine. However, the price of gas, it is still better to heat your house with gas than it is to heat your house with electricity. Because when you have the electric heaters on, the moment you turn them on, you have heat. The moment you turn them off, you don't have heat. Whereas with the gas, because it's the gas heating, you use the radiators, and so it turns on, and once the apartment warms a certain temperature, it turns off, and then you're able to not kind of use, the gas all day, right? So it actually, in my opinion, it is cheaper to have the gas. So my bills generally in the winter are around 200, sometimes up to 300 euros, because I want my apartment nice and warm and toasty. During the summer, the bill drops substantially to generally about 100 euros to 150 euros. I would also note that one of the things that really can affect your electricity bill is whether or not you really think about when you use your electricity. So for example, when I decide to do laundry, I do laundry at night when the cost of electricity is cheaper. There are lots of different plans for you to do with electricity. One thing I will note is that France has a little thing that I personally don't like, where they have you pay a set amount of money every single month. And then at the end of your contract year, they basically charge you essentially the difference. So if whatever you were using every single month was more over the course of the year than what you kind of paid each month, then you get a huge bill. So my first 3 years in Paris, I would get bills at the end of my contract year, which is in May, for about 1,000 euros. And I was like, we cannot be doing this. And it took me months to finally get to the point where I just got on a plan where I paid exactly how much I used every single month. And so now I'm better able to track how much electricity I use every single month. Okay, I am home and the artwork arrived like maybe 5 minutes after I got into the house, so I'm going to show it to you. So this is the piece that I'm putting in front of the television, and as you see, this is kind of how this wall is looking. I don't really love this full setup here. I think I really want bookcases, but I also don't think I fully know what I want, so I'm not trying to spend any new money until I really think through that. And then so this is my artwork, in case I've never told you that. But then 2 other pieces that I got are, let me show you. Oh, here they are. It's this one right here. You can't really see it. Let me move this way. Okay, so it's this one right here. Now you can see the phone in the reflection. And then this one isn't new, like this face isn't new, but I just needed a frame for it. I don't know if these are going to stay here. I just really wanted a little bit more color. I kind of wanted to put them on this wall, but maybe I have some other artwork that's kind of like old, like vintagey like this, and maybe I'll put it actually over here underneath this this lamp. But yeah, so that's the artwork that arrived. Also related to apartments, I want to talk about furnishing an apartment. So in France, there are 2 different types of apartments. You can get a furnished apartment or you can get an unfurnished apartment. My first apartment was a furnished apartment. Furnished apartments tend to be a bit more expensive. You can also though get this new apartment that I got. It is an unfurnished apartment. When I say it's unfurnished, I mean that it doesn't even come with the kitchen. They provide you with the toilet. They are obligated to provide you with the bathroom. They are obligated to provide you with the flooring. But they are not obligated to give you anything else. They aren't even obligated to give you lights, okay? And on top of that, when your apartment is unfurnished, it is as if you owned it. So if there is a problem in that apartment, you don't call the landlord. It is you have to deal with it. It's basically kind of like home ownership. So because an unfurnished apartment, you have to provide almost everything for it, and including the kitchen, it can get expensive. So my kitchen is very small. My kitchen cost me $5,000 to furnish. No, I think it may have been more than that. I think it may have been 5,000 euros. So maybe it was closer to 5,500 or $6,000. It was a lot of money to furnish my kitchen, and that was 3 years ago. I'm sure with cost of living and just with inflation, the cost of that has increased probably $500 to $1,000 depending on where you get the kitchen. When it comes to furniture, France is a really interesting country. You have IKEA, which is cheap, right? And frankly, I think that the cost of IKEA has gone up, whereas the quality is lower. So I really think IKEA has become a bad investment as far as furniture. So you have IKEA furniture, cheap stuff, like the cheap stuff. You then have vintage furniture, which is better quality, and generally you can actually find it for a pretty good price if you really look. You just have to make sure you reupholster it, because a lot of people have bed bugs and they won't tell you, so you do have to make sure your stuff is reupholstered when you buy vintage stuff. And then after that, you have ridiculously expensive stuff. There's no real middle ground here in France. There's really no furniture store that's kind of in between cheap IKEA and really expensive. And the only thing I would say is in between that somewhat is vintage. And so that's why a lot of my home is actually vintage. Cuckoo, happy Sunday. I am actually going to go do one of my very favorite activities, which is to have an American breakfast.
there is a diner called Breakfast in America, and it's a really great place to get a full American breakfast. And so I think I'm gonna go treat myself to that today. So yeah, let's go.
Okay, so I ultimately ended up going home because I got my food to go, because basically I was thinking about it and I was like, I want orange juice and I want, strawberries and, I want, my maple syrup and all that stuff. And, you're gonna have to pay for that at a restaurant. I am not making pancakes, eggs, and these little sausage links, so I of course still bought that. But yeah, I took it to go. I'm about to eat it, and then I'm going to go out again. But one thing I will say is that, I think we're all now beginning to really feel the cost of living increase here in France. Someone actually mentioned it today in church, and I thought it was a very poignant. I was like, okay, so it's not just me. But yeah, things that just normally weren't really that expensive are a bit more expensive now. And so as a result, it's like when it comes to things like fruits, strawberries, that stuff is imported from Spain. It's just way more expensive now. So I'm just not buying it at a restaurant because I can buy it at the market and I can pay less for that there. So yes, now we're going to enjoy our brunch and then out we go. Okay, so let's talk about dining out. Dining out is very much a big part of French culture. So having, those small coffees, dinner with friends, whatever it is, that is very much a part of French culture. So you're going to be spending money on dining out. Fortunately, it's often the same cost to dine out as it is to cook in your own house. So it's generally not that expensive. There are, however, a wave of coffee shops that are popping up all around Paris where they are charging people 6, 7, 8 euros for a cup of coffee. This is crazy. When I first arrived here, I would say generally most coffee, anything you wanted, was around the €3 to €4 price. Now it is almost always going to be €5 to €6, depending on what you get. Now, if you get a noisette, which is essentially an espresso with milk, that is still going to be in the €2 to €3 range. But even that, to me, is a little bit more expensive. That used to always just be €2 when I first arrived here in Paris. But generally, when it comes to most cafes, the prices are still pretty reasonable. You haven't really seen, a super huge jump in price. So generally, if you're looking to get a meal or whatnot, you can pay about €10 for your lunch or €15 for your dinner if you want to eat that out. Generally, most places, the price of wine should be no more than €5, ever. If you go somewhere and they're charging you kind of, €8, €9 for wine, they're overcharging you. Wine is generally just €5 everywhere, and that's what I have found. It has remained quite consistent since I've been here. So if I had to give you a budget as to how much I spend on dining out per week with coffees or eating out or just grabbing a glass of wine with friends, I would say that probably every single month, I don't eat out a ton, but I'd say probably every single month I budget about €100 for that, which would be, $130. So, it's not like I'm spending a ton of money eating out. That is definitely kind of what I would say is my price point if I'm thinking about it. Welcome to Cooking Time with Chef Adriel. So I went to the market on Saturday because I knew exactly what I wanted to have for dinner tonight, and I got everything to make it. So I'm going to be making a pasta with langoustine, asparagus, and onions, and it's going to be like within a cream sauce. So these are my langoustine. I don't know if you've ever seen langoustine before. I didn't know that these existed until I moved to France, or maybe I did, maybe they're just called something else in the US and I just don't know the right word. I also got asparagus from the market. Asparagus are in season, but the thing is with fruit and vegetables is when it's at the beginning of the season, it is super, super expensive. So I have had to wait like a month before I could buy these asparagus. They were €2 cheaper, so it was worth the wait. And then I got 2 onions. I can only find one, but I did buy 2, so there's a second one lurking around here. And I got my fruit. So I got 4 oranges, so I can make orange juice, and then I got 3 grapefruits, so that I could have grapefruit in the morning. All of this, so the 4 oranges, the 3 grapefruits, the asparagus, and the 2 onions all came to €10. It was like a little bit, it was like €9.60. The most expensive thing were the grapefruit. I ended up buying 3. They were $1.50 each. Hurt my heart. So I basically paid $4.50 for some darn grapefruits, for 3 grapefruits, but I just really wanted some grapefruit. So basically everything else besides the grapefruits came to basically about €5, which is, a good deal. The langoustine, I bought the langoustine and the salmon. I bought langoustine and salmon, and I got a nice big piece of salmon. So these two, and I got a lot of langoustine, so these two together came to about 25 euros for the langoustine and the salmon. So these are sold in packs of 3 at the grocery store. This is our little creme. It's semi-épaissé légère. So this is what you use for cream. And then, of course, I got the butter and everything. I already have the pasta here. So I'm going to whip this up, going to make this meal, and then I'm going to eat it. On the same line as food and dining out, let's talk about groceries and, cooking inside our own home. So one of the things I would say when it comes to groceries, I buy most of my groceries at the farmer's market. I also have a Naturalia, which is a bio market or bio store that is close to me. And then I also have a normal regular grocery store that is also relatively close to me. I do not go into the normal regular grocery store. Mine is a Carrefour. I don't go into there that often because, one, it's expensive. The cost of food has definitely gone up. So I would say that when I first arrived in France, I used to pay, 2 or 3 euros for a dozen eggs. Now a dozen eggs is like 4 euros. Or 4 euros and 50 cents. Like, it's so expensive. And that's something that's become, kind of a big thing, is people are like, why are things getting so expensive? I would also note that just small things in the grocery store I think are more expensive, like pasta, milk used to be less than €1 when I arrived. I think it was like 88 cents. And now it's definitely like €1.20, which I think is way too expensive for milk. Like, it's just insane how much the cost has increased. So yeah, I would say that the cost is definitely going up as far as groceries. So because of that, I only buy just my staples at the grocery store. So when I say staples, I mean I buy, my barbecue sauce, my maple syrup, my microwave popcorn, my chips. That's the sort of stuff that I buy from the grocery store. Whenever I can, if possible, I like to buy my pasta from the Italian store where they make the pasta fresh. And so then that way I can have like the fresh pasta. And then also when it comes to things like cereals, and beans and things like that, I again try to buy that from like a bulk store, like a store that sells those things. I forgot the word in English for it. We call it vrac. Where you go, you bring your own container and you pull it. So where possible, I like to buy it like that, because then you're just paying for it on the basis of your weight. And that also tends to be a much cheaper way of buying it than being in, like a regular grocery store. Now, the bio store can also be a great place to get some staples. It also can be a great place for me to get, things like almond butter. And shockingly enough, the bio store can actually be cheaper than the grocery store a lot of times. So I really kind of like that. And also sometimes when it comes to produce, the produce at the bio store is cheaper than what you might find at the market. So let's talk about market prices. Most of my groceries, whether that be fruits and vegetables, fish, meat, anything, even some pasta, because there's a guy who makes the pasta. Generally, all of that I buy at the market, because the market is generally very often the cheapest option. So take the grocery store, for example. The grocery store is going to probably sell you lettuce. That lettuce is going to be €3 maybe, €2 maybe, and it's going to go bad in a day. The market is going to sell you the lettuce. They're going to sell it to you for 50 cents, and it's going to go bad in, 3 days, 4 days. If it's still going to go bad in, 3 days, wouldn't you rather pay 50 cents for it than pay €2 or €3 for it, right? So, and when I'm saying euros, just so you all know, think about euros as, if you want to convert it into dollars, add like about 25 cents to it, I think is like the easiest way to, or 25% increase to it is kind of the easiest way to do it. So at the way markets work is there are two types of people who work at the markets. There are the traders, and those are the people who go and they buy food in bulk and then they sell it to you. So they're like an intermediary. And then you have the producers, and those are the people who are actually growing the food. The producers tend to be cheaper. Okay. The thing though to keep in mind when it comes to producers versus the little traders is that producers are going to only have food that is in season. Whereas with the traders, since they're like an intermediary, they're buying the food from elsewhere, they have a greater variety. Also though, the issue with that is that because the food is not being produced in France, anything that isn't made in France is just going to be more expensive. Additionally, even if that fruit or vegetable is in season, at the beginning of the season, it's going to be more expensive. So with all of that said, as far as groceries and market, how much do I spend per month and what has been the increase? Well, to give it to you this way, I would say that per week, I probably go to the market about 3 times. And I would say that with each visit, I probably spend, €30 maybe. And so as a result, that would come to about €90 a week. I would, of course, increase that in case I do buy other groceries. So I would definitely add on yet another €30 to that. So all in all, I would say I'm about €120 max, €120 max per week. As a result, that would, I'd say, convert to about $140 roughly. So if you multiply that by 3 weeks, then basically we're at what? Like essentially about 400 something, 500 euros, $500 a month. So maybe roughly about $500 a month is what I spend on groceries living in Paris. I will also note, if you live outside of Paris, the cost of groceries is ridiculously cheap. Ridiculously cheap. Like, just like much cheaper than what you're paying in Paris. Last and certainly not least, let's talk transportation cost. In Paris, I pay for the yearly subscription, and the yearly subscription is a set price of about 90 euros. There are reduced prices available to people who are retired, etc. Also to children as well, I believe. I will note that has definitely increased, and every time they increase it, people become livid, right? We're like, what the heck are you doing? So I think the price right now is about 88 euros and 80 something cents. When it comes to, let's see, I think 3 years ago, when I last did this video, I believe it was around 80 euros. No, it was a little less than that. It was like 76 euros or 77 euros. So it has been an increase of about 10 euros since I moved here. So if you round 88, that's about what? Throwing it out, about $95, right? $98. So the cost of transportation has definitely increased, and they do continue to increase it, particularly if you're buying like individual tickets. If you have a subscription, you're actually been probably pretty lucky, because I would say the increase with the subscription has generally been less than if you're buying like the tickets and that sort of thing every single month. Now, of course, we couldn't do a cost of living video without talking about healthcare cost. Healthcare costs in France compared to the US are basically negligible. So once you get into the government health insurance, that covers basically, I think, 95%, 95% of most stuff. Okay, let me back this up, because I'm talking and I don't think I fully explained it. So I don't know if you've seen the video I did where I talked about the differences in healthcare between France and the US. And I talked a little bit about the system. The way the system works is you have 3 different types of doctors. You have Sector 1, Sector 2, Sector 3. Sector 1 accepts government health insurance, and they charge their services at a rate where it's covered completely by the government. Sector 2 charges more than what the government, pays and covers, so you will have a difference to pay. Sector 3 either doesn't take insurance at all or charges even more than Sector 2. So there's a much larger gap between what the government is going to cover and what you are going to have to pay. I will say this, our inclination as Americans is to think that when we pay more for something, we generally get better service, because a lot of times in the US, I would say that is actually true. That is not necessarily true in France. You will find terrible doctors in Sector 3, and some of the best doctors you will find in Sector 1. So it really is about just, you have to be looking, you just have to know. So that's one thing. There's also private healthcare insurance. And the way I would say to think about it is like, I don't know, those commercials I used to watch as a kid that talked about Medicaid Part B, right? Like they cover like what Medicaid doesn't cover. Essentially, we have what is called Mutuelle, and that is your private insurance, and that covers in excess of what the government covers. When I say that, I mean that they have like a certain multitude over which they will cover in excess of what the government covers. So if the government covers $10, they might cover 2 times what the government covers. So they'll cover $20, right? So if your visit is $30, then the government will reimburse you $10 and your private health insurance will reimburse you $20. And then that's how ultimately you end up paying nothing. Now, you don't need to get the private insurance, but it's good. The private insurance isn't that much per month. So for mine, I have been paying the exact same price for like 4 years, and that's been $76 or 76 euros, which, what do we convert that to? About $84, right? So generally when I go to the doctor, whether I go to a specialist, whether I get a scan, anything, blood test, anything like that, I pay nothing. I pay absolutely nothing. So yeah, it's a really, really great system because you don't have to worry about going broke. So the way it works is you pay it and then you're reimbursed. Generally, those reimbursements come quite quickly. So I would say for healthcare, if I had to budget what I spend on healthcare a month, I would take into account the cost of my private insurance and then maybe add another $10 to that, and that's it. So maybe my healthcare costs are $100 a month. And frankly, realistically, it's just my private health insurance that's really my only healthcare cost. So yeah, healthcare, man. To know you can get sick and you can pay for it. It's great. With all that in mind, I think the question remains, is it still cheaper to live in Paris than it is in the US? 100%. Even with the inflation, I would say since my last video, I've seen my bills probably increase, I don't know, maybe anywhere from 10% to 25%. Some things have obviously been more, but I think if I had to average it out, I would say it's about 25% just for me. With that being said, is it still better than the US? 110%. All right, so with that said, there you have it. The cost of living in Paris, France in 2025. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments, if I didn't answer anything, and also if you happen to live in a different area in France, let us know in the comments what your cost of living is so that we can give a little bit of comparison to what it costs in Paris. So thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!